Why hello there, and welcome back to Pounded in the Butt by the handsome review of two-time Hugo Award finalist Chuck Tingle's tabletop role-playing game, The Tingleverse, the official Chuck Tingle role-playing game. Which is, of course, presumably the only role-playing game written by Chuck Tingle, who, if you are unfamiliar, is the author of such works as Space Raptor Butt Invasion, Trans Wizard Harriet Porber and the Bad Boy Parasaurolophus, double featured by the Sentient Bisexual Movie Theaters, and Pounded in the Butt by my own book, Pounded in the Butt by my own butt, among many others. And I suppose before I go any further into this review, I should address the obvious question here, and no, this is not an adult role-playing game. There is no discussion of butts and the pounding thereof by dinosaur billionaires. It is just a role-playing game that is set in the world of prolific erotica author Chuck Tingle, who, as I mentioned, also wrote the game, which makes this a very interesting thing because I've seen a lot of role-playing games based on other media, and this is the only one I've ever seen that was actually written by the original author. So let's get into it and see if this proves that love is real. As stated, this game takes place in the Chuck Tingle multiverse, and while there are consistent elements there, like sentient objects and chocolate milk, Tinglers don't really have that consistent of a setting. It's just whatever needs to be there for the story is there for the story. And similar to that, the version of the world that this game takes place in is one that is tailored to fit a role-playing game. So obviously the game is set in Billings, Montana, the setting of many a Tingler, and as with most games that are set in modern settings, there isn't that much really written about the world because it's just, kinda like this. The notable exceptions, of course, being that certain things exist, like Bigfoots and Void Worms and handsome sentient Prison Break Season 2 DVD box sets, and other things do not exist, like guns and explosives, alcohol, although chocolate milk has similar effects, the internet, and cell phones. So, if you're ever struggling with the issue of how to deal with the problems that things like the internet and cell phones can cause in a fictional world, just say they don't exist. You are literally allowed to do that. And as I said, that's how Chuck Tingle does it. He just puts in whatever needs to be there for things to work out. So, your characters need access to medieval arms and armor? Okay, well, you can get those things at the grocery store now. Easy solution. He does go into more detail on some specific locations, like the void creature-infested frozen lake, the wizard-staffed new public library, the spooky, haunted old public library, and Ted Cobbler's house. As well as going a bit into the void, which is the space between timelines described as a vast, endless plane of darkness and infinite sadness, and is where most of the monsters come from, so I guess that is the replacement for the internet in this game world. And also, in keeping with the Tingleverse, there is something of a focus on alternate timelines as well as meta-awareness of the characters and world being fictional, so yeah, Tinglers are a bit more complex than you might expect. And obviously the most notable thing here is that little bit of meta-awareness, which kind of makes this a game where you play as fictional characters. Like, there are the characters doing their stuff, and then there is you playing the game, but then there's this additional meta layer between the two, where the characters themselves are fictional characters in a Tingler, a layer which the game can and does interact with. In simplest terms, it is a game where you play a character who is actually a character in a story and may be partially or fully aware of that fact, and also the fact that they are a character in a role-playing game. So a +1 for the setting. It is not detailed incredibly well, but I just happen to really like the casual absurdist nature of the Tingleverse. Things are very weird, but presented as if they are totally normal, which is the correct way to do absurdism. Like, of course the sentient puppet show is aware of the fact that it's a fictional character. That is a totally normal thing to happen here. Characters in the Tingleverse have 6 attributes: Strength, Dexterity, Fortitude, Book Smarts, Street Smarts, and Charm, which are generated by rolling 6 sets of 4d6, discarding the lowest result from each, and then assigning them as desired. Then we must select our character's type, and of course we do have the option of human, but the interesting options are Bigfoot, Raptor, and Unicorn. Just the kinds of things you would expect. And let's go with Unicorn, which gives us +1 to Charm and -1 to Fortitude. Also, our Magic Horn allows us to recall a used cool move and heal a character 1d8 hit points per level once each per day. However, we also cannot wear helmets that have not been specifically designed for unicorns because of our unicorn-shaped head. Next is our Trot. There are 5 options here: Bad Boy, Charmer, Sneak, True Buckaroo, and Wizard, each of which has a minimum requirement in one of the ability scores, and you might think that these are just analogs of Fighter, Bard, Rogue, Cleric, and Wizard, but, not exactly. Except for Wizard, that one is pretty much a wizard. And we qualify for everything other than Bad Boy, but in the spirit of being as tingly as possible, let's go with True Buckaroo, which gives us 1d8 hit points, +1 per point of Fortitude above 15, which we do not have, but it is still relevant to mention, so I will be mentioning those things even when they do not apply to our character specifically. Our Trot also sets our attack score, range score, and defense score, which for a True Buckaroo is 10, 10, and -5. And also for all of the Trots at first level. We also get a -1 bonus to our attack score for each point of strength above 15, so no bonus there, and a +1 bonus to our defense score for each point of dexterity above 15. So we do get a +2 bonus from that, bringing our defense score up to -3. And these numbers will make sense later, or at the very least be understandable. We also get our saves versus Void, Fear, and Spell, which are 10, 14, and 14 respectively. And about now you might be thinking, hold on, is the Tingleverse an OSR game? And yeah, pretty much. We also have a total surprise modifier, which is not affected by our Trot, but I didn't know where else to mention it, so I'm mentioning it here, and is equal to 11 +1 for each point of Street Smarts above 14, so 11. True Buckaroos also gain the ability to, once per day, assist on a roll by rolling as well and allowing the better result to be taken, as well as the ability to heal a touched creature for 1d4 +1 hit points, increasing by 1d4 +1 at 6th level and every 6 levels after. And there is no times per day or anything on that, the only restriction is that the ability only functions during combat. And then trying to manipulate that restriction to get extra healing can actually result in the loss of a level from becoming disconnected from the narrative. And True Buckaroos do have one more restriction, and that is, they are required to be non-violent, and, quote, will never directly attack in combat. So this is not just a cleric analog, it is a fully healing and support class, with basically no combat ability, which is a pretty cool thing that you don't really see that often. Next is our alignment, which is your traditional good/evil, law/chaos type. However, the book specifies that player characters must be good aligned, because, let's be honest here, evil player characters, and their players, are just a continuous problem that you have to deal with, and neutral characters are just kind of indecisive. I say as someone prone to both indecision and neutral alignments. So for our character, we do actually only have 3 out of 9 of the options available, and let's just go with chaotic good, as unicorns do. And next up is unique ways, which you might think are like feats, except they don't call them that, but are actually a little different. We can select up to 2 unique ways, +1 for each point of street smarts above 15, and I say can select because unique ways have both a bonus and a penalty, so you can choose not to take them if you don't want to. and can also drop them later if they become more trouble than they're worth. So let's take meta-awareness, which allows our character to be fully aware of the fact that they are a character in a Chuck Tingle role-playing game. And this gives us automatic success on fear saves because we are aware that nothing is real, but also imparts a -1 penalty to our book smart score, as this awareness makes the details of the world around us seem less important. Then let's take Mosey, which means that we move with a cool, relaxed swagger, always traveling at the back of the party and acting last in initiative. However, this relaxed approach also gives us more time to take in our surroundings, granting a +2 bonus to street smarts. And that raises our street smarts to 16, which is now high enough to give a +2 bonus to our total surprise modifier, and I assume an additional unique way. So let's go with Fetish, which is just an area of hyper fascination, and we do have to pick a specific thing, so let's say that our character is a bit of an ichthyophile, gaining a -2 bonus on all checks regarding knowledge of the chosen thing, in our case, fish. However, we also take a +1 penalty to charm checks involving fish due to our nervousness at being in the presence of our hyper fascination. And this is the Tingleverse, so the chances that an important NPC will be a handsome bass mobster are greater than 0. But now on to cool moves, which are cool moves that our character can do. We can perform 2 level 1 cool moves per day, +1 for having a book smart score of 14. If it were 15, we would get an extra level 2 move, 16 an extra level 3 move, and so on and so on. Characters know 2 cool moves at first level, so let's take Love Rainbow, which is basically color spray, and Timeline Haze, which lets us pull the timeline out of alignment to create an area of hazy cover. And our Mosey unique way also allows us to use the Charmer cool move Identify once per day without having to use one of our cool move slots. And now for equipment. We get 3d6 times 100, so $1,000. And notably, all characters start with a timeline bag, which is a magical purse or wallet that basically functions like a bag of holding, and is capable of holding items up to 3 feet wide. And this is basically just an elegant solution to the problem of needing to carry around a fantasy settings amount of stuff in a modern setting, where it's not really as common to have characters carrying around massive packs everywhere they go. Also, maybe it's just me, but I find the idea of being able to put your sword in your wallet to be hilarious. So let's get ourselves some scale mail and a shield. Then we don't need any weapons because of the whole no attacking thing, so let's just get some adventuring essentials, leaving us with $340. So let's take 100 of that in cash and leave the rest on our debit card. Our scale mail, in addition to being fashionable, gives us a +2 bonus to our defense score, and our shield another +1, bringing our defense score up to 0. And this character is done. And overall, kinda average, but with some interesting options. Like, your character can be a Bigfoot bad boy from space with social anxiety and killer abs, and each of those things will have a meaningful impact on your character. However, the real notable feature here is the cool moves, because they do provide cool things for your character to do. And because every trot gets a full complement of cool moves, there isn't really any type of character that only hits things. They might have cool moves that are focused around hitting things, but overall, they all do have some kind of neat things that they can do. And a lot of the options here are pretty cool, like just for example, later true buckaroo moves allow you to do things like retrieve items from alternate timelines, shrink things by placing the word tiny in front of them in the text of the game world, or contact Chuck Tingle himself and ask him to change something about the story. And yes, a lot of these things are just kind of rethemed versions of D&D spells, but they are rethemed in a way which makes them much more fun and can actually make them function slightly differently. Like, Author Contact is basically Wish, but given the context that you are contacting the author of the world you are in and asking them to make changes to the story, the way in which you are going to apply the effects of that ability are going to be considerably different. I mean, if you're a good DM, they're going to be different. If you're a bad DM, they're going to be exactly the same. However, I will say that I am a little bit disappointed in the options available for types. Like, Dr. Tingle recently made a post about the lore of Tingle types, where he basically separated everything into 4 categories. Dinosaurs, including all types of prehistoric creatures. Bigfoots, I believe he calls them big feet, which is all cryptids. Unicorns, which are just unicorns, and then living objects, which are completely absent from this game. Which is a bit of an issue for me because, personally, living objects are the part of the Tingleverse that I find most interesting and am kind of disappointed to not see them here in this game. I mean, he did eventually put out a whole living objects handbook, I just really would have liked them to have been part of the core rules. But back on topic, I really would have liked to have seen that being more the way that the character type choices were represented, more like general categories instead of one type of dinosaur, one type of cryptid, unicorn, and human. So a 4 out of 6 for character creation. There are some very fun and interesting options here. I just kind of wish there were more of them, especially in the types and unique ways, just because the source material is so incredibly varied, and I would like to see that reflected more. As an OSR, or at the very least OSR adjacent game, the Tingleverse uses our old friend, the numbered icosahedron, also known as the D20. And for a basic ability check, we roll said D20 with success on a result lower than the relevant ability score. And that is why bonuses are negative and penalties are positive on those kinds of rolls. So let's say, for example, our character needs to identify a fish. That would be a test of our book smarts, so we need to roll under 14 to succeed. However, because of our fish fetish unique way, we also get a -2 bonus to that roll. And succeed. Now, combat works a bit differently, so let's say we have encountered a sky shark. Oh yeah, I guess I did kind of make a character who can't actually attack, so let's say that they are accompanied by a bad boy, who very much can attack. First, all of the players declare their intended actions for the round. Then a D10 is rolled for each character's initiative, except for our character, who always acts last because of their mosey unique way. But other than them, characters act in order of initiative from lowest to highest. And the bad boy is up first and attacks the sky shark, and this is going to be fun. The basic 2-hit number in this game is 10, and then to get the actual 2-hit number, we add the attacking character's attack score, so 9, and the target's defense score, which is -8, for a total of 11. Then we roll a d20, and if the result is equal to or higher than the 2-hit number, the attack hits and damage is dealt. And now it is the sky shark's turn, so same process, roll versus 10 plus attack and defense scores. But now it is our unicorn's turn, and they prepare to use Love Rainbow. But first, a bit more on cool moves. We have 3 level 1 cool move slots per day, and in those slots, we must prepare each cool move we wish to use that day. So, for example, we could prepare 2 uses of Love Rainbow and 1 of Timeline Haze. And then when we use one of those cool moves, that slot is exhausted until the next day when we prepare our cool moves again. A system that you will be familiar with if you've played older editions of Dungeons & Dragons, and are probably thankful that you've never had to use if you haven't. But back to the fight, Love Rainbow can affect 1d8 creatures in the area of effect, but there's only 1 here, so we don't really need to roll for that. However, the shark does get to make a spell save, rolling a d20 against its spell save value of 18. And since it did not meet or exceed the save value, it is incapacitated for 1d4 rounds. And of course there are a few remaining odds and ends, but in general, those are the mechanics, just kinda basic old school D&D type stuff. And first thoughts, I am not what you would call a fan of Vancian magic. I don't think anyone actually is. More so, it's one of those things that's only held on as long as it has because it was a thing in Dungeons & Dragons. And if there is one thing that D&D players hate, it is anything that is even slightly different from what they're used to. Even when it is objectively better. Especially when it's objectively better. And personally, I do feel like preparing spells is a sort of thing that also prevents players from really exploring their options, because you don't want to waste a spell, or cool move in this case, slot on something that might be useful in a very specific situation. You are going to prepare only what you are most likely to actually use, or, you're just wasting your resources. And also, as you might expect if you've watched, any of my other videos, I am not particularly fond of the adding together of 3 numbers, one of which is likely to be negative, to get your 2-hit number. Because here's the thing, you can just do roll plus modifier versus AC with the exact same maths, you just have to shuffle the numbers around a bit. However, I do really like these simplified roll under skill check mechanics, and I realize they are not unique in any way, and I like them in other systems where I see them. As much as I am in favor of unified mechanics, I am much more in favor of simplified mechanics. So a 3 out of 6 for mechanics. It is your basic old school rule set, no more, no less. As a game written by Dr. Chuck Tingle, this does of course share a writing style with the rest of his work, so it does have that very distinctive, somewhat esoteric pro-love way about it that you would expect from a Tingler. However, man named Chuck is not known for his editing, and that does apply here as well. So there are quite a few typos, but then also errors like referring to street smarts as intelligence, mixing up the names of 2 different trots, or kind of being unclear about whether or not a specific bonus or penalty is supposed to be positive or negative. Incidentally, that is why I am just generally in favor of writing things in such a way that bonuses are always positive and penalties are always negative. Especially in situations like this where you are mixing rollover and roll under mechanics. And as mentioned earlier, there is no adult content in this book, although there are a few suggestive things slipped in, like a few of the names of the abilities, like the wizard's hard as rocks abilities, the anal unique way, and the open hole ability, but those are just, silly little names. Entirely possible that they are unintentional, and the actual abilities themselves are not salacious in any way. So a +1 for writing, provided you like Chuck Tingle, and this is the official Chuck Tingle role-playing game, so presumably liking Chuck Tingle would be the main reason you would be interested in it. And no adjustment for content. There is an appropriate amount of player options available, and even a small selection of monsters, so it's a good all-in-one book, but, it doesn't go above and beyond or anything. So, every game has a weak point, and this is the weak point. It is an 8x10 Amazon print-on-demand book, and the print quality is fine, it's just an odd size, and it does look pretty good from the outside. The problem is, once we get inside, it is literally just text on pages with chapter breaks, and really, really bad page breaks. For example, here on the True Buckaroo, the title and labels for a table, which is on the next page. And then, literally, the exact same thing, table title, table labels, table here. And then we have table broken across 2 pages, is just, overall, not very well put together. And that is just an extremely common issue in this book. Or here's another one. Got the social anxiety unique way, title at the bottom of a page, actual entry on the next page, then just like 4 words in a single line on their own page. These are basic layout issues that should be fixed. But aside from that, it's fine. Like, all of the tables, while just, simple tabbed out tables, are legible. They convey the information to you, and that is the important thing about, why they're here. And while, as I said, all those page breaks are just absolutely awful, they don't necessarily make things unreadable, just very inconvenient. And you may have noticed that there is nothing in the way of illustrations here, which is really unfortunate given that the weird cover art is one of those really distinctive elements of the Tingle brand, and it would just be so much nicer to have some of that, sprinkled throughout the book. And of course we have my very thematically appropriate bookmark that I forgot to take out of the book before I started making the video, so now my bookmark is in the video. However, when we get to the monster guide, there actually are some nice illustrations for all of the monsters. Like the man with no eyes and wieners for hair, and my personal favorite, the manifested concept of self-loathing. And all of the monsters have a very thorough write-up, like 1 to 2 pages each, and they're all the kind of weird, wacky stuff that you expect from the mind of one Dr. Chuck Tingle. I'm pretty sure there's a Tingler about getting pounded by one of these. So yeah, that is the book. There's a character sheet, it's a character sheet, nothing really impressive about that, but yeah, that is it. And I've never done layout for Amazon's print-on-demand service, but I have done layout for Kindle, and that's what this looks like it is. An EPUB that has been printed into a book, hence the really bad page breaks, because it was not formatted on pages, it was formatted on a continuous format. Which is really weird because as far as I know, there is no digital version of this available. We're just stuck with the digital version printed into a book. So, 2 out of 6 for presentation. There are some good qualities, mainly just those illustrations in the monster guide, but overall it's just an EPUB printed into a book, and while that doesn't severely impact readability, there was just no effort made into putting the book into pages. And that was the Tingleverse, the official Chuck Tingle role-playing game. And it is a Chuck Tingle role-playing game. That is the selling point here. It is a game that allows you to have an adventure in the world of a Tingler, brave the frozen lake, drink some chocolate milk, and maybe even pound or be pounded by a Bigfoot lawyer. I mean, technically you could do all of those things in D&D as well, but here they are more of an expected part of the adventure. And the game itself, while a bit antiquated, does serve that experience. However, for as unique of a setting and experience as it offers, I do wish it were built on a more modern architecture. Because a Chuck Tingle role-playing game is something that sounds like it's going to provide a very unique experience and attract players who are interested in more unconventional titles. I have had multiple conversations about this game where people are initially intrigued by the idea, but then just kinda lose interest when the mechanics come up. Because if there is one thing you are not expecting a Chuck Tingle role-playing game to be, it's conventional. And it really feels like the concepts here could be much better expressed in a less rigid system that could more easily handle the absurdist style of the setting. Allow for things like characters being pterodactyls or sentient roller coasters without having to have each of those things specifically statted up. And the game can still feature rigidity in other ways. And that's really all I have to say on the Tingleverse. It is the sort of thing where you probably know immediately if it's for you or not. And if that is your kind of thing, it does a good job delivering that experience. However, it does feel like there is way more potential in the source material than is actually utilized in the game. And just throwing this out there in case Dr. Tingle happens to be watching, I would be more than happy to work on a new, more modern 2nd edition of this game. And thank you for watching, with special thanks to my Fight and Flail Snails, Randy Mulholland, and Toshiro Crow. If you'd like to be cool like them, check out my Patreon, where you can get early access to videos and fun stuff that I make for the Patreon. But if you don't want to do that, that's cool too. You can still hit all the lovely buttons, like, subscribe, these other videos floating around the screen, which I am sure are lovely videos that you will also enjoy. And I will see you next time.